Hello, and we are live. Hi, everybody. Welcome to my AMA, my Ask Me Anything. I do these Ask Me Anythings once a month, and it's my way of trying to provide perspective, advice, what counsel, whatever might be helpful to folks. Because when I was building my career, there are many times where I wish I could just ask somebody. So here you go. Now you get a chance to ask somebody. I'm Shellye Archambeau. I wrote the book Unapologetically Ambitious: Take Risks, Break Barriers, and Create Success on Your Own Terms as a way of sharing tips, techniques, perspectives, and insights on how to achieve what you want out of life by being intentional. And this session, you are all welcome to. What we do and how it works is people submit questions in advance. If they register on my YouTube channel, you can do that. I also take questions from the chat box. So feel free during our session to ask me some live questions if you've got them, or qualify a question you may have sent in before. Either one, you're more than welcome to do that. And it's great to see that people are joining. Let me know in the responses or in the chat. Can you hear me okay? And are you ready to get started? Okay, I'm already getting a question on the chat, so why don't I start with the chat first? Let me take a read. How do you recommend a leader respond during a time of defamation and brand damage? These are tough because for many brands, they go through periods where the brand is strong and resilient, and periods where the brand is under attack. We can all think of times when that's happened to just about every brand that's out there. The best thing that a leader can do is to make sure they're reinforcing with their team the true values of the brand, acknowledging whatever it is that's happening, and then do your best within the company and with other leadership members to make sure that you're addressing what's happening appropriately, honestly, and authentically. No one is perfect, and no brand or no company is perfect. We are all a work in progress. And the key is employees tend to continue to follow and be supportive if they feel that the intent is right, even if the execution was a mistake. And I don't know the specifics about what you're talking about, but I hope that's helpful. When you think of examples, I think of many years ago, there was, a Tylenol scare. Tylenol, which was a drug that everybody counted on to be able to take, and they actually had tampering, and some people got sick. I can't remember, there might have even been deaths. And the company came out immediately and owned what happened, right? They said, even whether they had done all the research or not, they didn't wait a month to figure out what really happened. They came out right away and said, we are responsible. We're going to figure out what happened, and we are going to fix it. They recalled everything off the shelf. I mean, they took proactive action. As a result, was their brand damaged when it happened? The answer is yes. But they were able to work through it and to strengthen and get their brand back. If anything, they even built stronger loyalty afterwards because of how they handled it. Whereas other brands, and I won't use names here, have had issues. And first they deny, they say it's not their fault, it's somebody else's fault. And then they come back later and start to admit, well, maybe they had problems. But they don't take complete ownership, and people never feel comfortable that they can count on them and rely on them. So the key here is the brand just needs to take ownership for whatever's happened, whatever role they played, and then work hard to rectify it and earn back trust. Hope that helped with the answer. All right, and I love it. Please submit questions. All right, so let me turn to some of the questions I got in advance. Here's the first one. How did you pinpoint your goal and create a written or documented plan to get there? And then how did you deal with life when it presented you with a new path or opportunity? So first of all, here's the secret. That's not so secret because I share it. People know that I decided I wanted to be a CEO when I was 16. Now, when I did that, did I know what being a CEO really meant? No. And the reason I picked it, and I want to use that word very specifically, I just picked it. The reason I picked it is because I happen to enjoy clubs, French Club, American Field Service, National Honor Society, I mean, you name it, I was involved in all these different clubs. And I liked leading them. And a guidance counselor told me that, clubs were kind of like business. You get people together and get things done. So I just picked it. So what I would tell you is when you try to determine what's your goal, don't worry about it being the perfect goal, right? Many people get caught up in knots because there's so many choices and how do I know exactly what I want to do? You probably don't. That's okay. Pick something that is in an arena that you like, that is in an industry or job or something might be interesting, but pick something and work toward it. Because here's the key. By picking something and working toward it, number one, you might get fortunate like I was, that once I actually got there and heading there, I actually liked what it was. But even if you don't, you get halfway there and you think, man, maybe this isn't for me. What you've done along the way is you've built skills that are transferable. So you'll be able to apply them to something else. And you learn more about yourself and your strengths, your weaknesses, what you're good at, what you're not. So don't fret about picking the perfect goal, but pick a goal and work toward it so that you're making forward momentum. Too many people can't decide what they want to do. And what happens is they just keep moving sideways. They try this and they try that and they try this, but they aren't actually doing it with much forward momentum. So pick a goal. Like I said, pick something related to what you might be interested in, what you'd like to do, or what you're pretty good at. Work toward it. And then check. If it turns out to be something, maybe not, that's all right. You now know a lot more about yourself and you have more skills to leverage to be able to select the next goal. But the key is pick a goal and work toward it. And how do you work toward it? How do you build that plan? Here are the questions I always ask myself. All right, what's the goal? Well, I wanted to be a CEO. So what has to be true for me to achieve that goal? And here's the key. I didn't know. And odds are you aren't going to know exactly what needs to be true for you to achieve whatever goal you set in front of yourself. So therefore, you have to do the research. I call it the homework, right? I mean, as a kid, we always had to do homework. And guess what? I still do homework because I don't know everything. So I have to get out there and do the research. So who are the CEOs? So whatever goal you pick for yourself, who are those people? What were their career trajectories like? Where did they start? What skills does it look like? What life choices did people make who were in those arenas? All those things, you do the research. And once you have the research, then you can say, okay, I know it needs to be true. These are the skills. These might be in the environment I need to be. This might be the location, right? That's critical to live. Who knows? But once you know those things, now you can put a plan in place. You can say, okay, how do I make this profile that I've built, how do I make this true for me? And that becomes your plan. And you just work backwards to say, okay, if I want to become a CEO, then I've obviously got to be a senior executive, probably in the C-suite. All right, if that's the case, then what skills? Where did they start? Where did CEOs start? I started my career in sales, selling computers, coming out of Wharton. I don't think anybody else came out of Wharton selling computers. All right? And the reason I did it was not because I was in love with sales or even that I was in love, right, with computers. I picked tech because it's a high-growing industry and therefore would have more opportunity. And I picked sales because every single CEO at IBM, which was the leading tech company at the time, started out in sales. So I didn't know what was magic about sales. I didn't know what was key. I didn't know anything. But I figured, this must be the start of the path to power. So that's why I picked sales. So be intentional. Be thoughtful about what you're doing. It's all about building skills and experiences that will build on each other to enable you to continue to grow, learn, and thrive. And then how did you deal with life when it presented you with a new opportunity or path? Well, I looked at it through the rubric of what is it I'm trying to do. For instance, I got many opportunities to do jobs, but frankly, I didn't see how those jobs put me or kept me on the path to becoming a CEO. So therefore, I declined. And sometimes there were jobs that came about that it wasn't the job that I thought I wanted to do. But when I looked at it from the rubric of I want to be a CEO, I was like, okay, this is a good job, right? A good opportunity. So those are the ways in which I used the framework. Because here's what happens. When people offer you a new job, it always sounds great. it always sounds great. It's almost like the old, siren song, if you know that, right? Where whenever people are selling you and inviting you and really want you to join and take a position, they make the job sound wonderful, just wonderful. So it's really easy to therefore say, I ought to take it. Sounds wonderful. They really want me. I feel needed. I'll take it. But the key is look at that job, look at the experiences that you'll get, the skills that you'll build, and decide, will that actually keep me on path to the goal I have? That should be the decision factor. All right. Next, how do you prioritize your health and healthy habits with such a busy schedule? Oh boy, this one's a tough one, really. And I learned this the hard way, and some of you may have heard this, but I actually went through a period in my late 20s where I literally got depressed. And what I learned going through that period after I got help from a psychologist was I wasn't doing anything to actually invest in myself from what should I call it? From the standpoint of being healthy, of being good to myself. I was giving 100% of myself away to everybody else, to my husband, to my kids, to the community, to the jobs, and everybody. People wanted things. I said yes, and I did it because I thought that's what I needed to do. I just needed to say yes to everything. But what I really needed to do was to figure out a way to say yes to what I needed to keep me healthy. So how did I make time after that? I prioritized it. I looked and said, all right, I need to exercise often, right? To this day, I exercise typically 4 to 5 days a week. And the only way I found that I could make that work with my schedule in my life was I had to wake up early and get it done early. If I got it done early, then I got it done. So I had to prioritize it. So I'd wake up early and I'd go to the gym on my way to work. I'd shower there, change at the gym, and head to work. That, therefore, used the least amount of time. It took too much time to go to the gym, come back home, and go again. So that's the way I did that. And I also learned I needed to eat healthy meals. And one of my biggest weaknesses was lunch. Because at work you get busy, right? You're running around doing things, and all of a sudden lunch is either passed or you've lost the window or you don't have time, so you grab junk, right? Whatever happens to be around. So I started taking my lunch to work. All through my career, even as a CEO, if I didn't have a lunch meeting, I took my lunch to work. Why? Again, not because I couldn't afford to buy lunch, but because I wanted to make sure that no matter what happened to my day's schedule, I had healthy food that was easily accessible and able to consume. So those were just a couple of things, right, that I needed for me. And actually, I'll share the third because I learned there were 3 things. The third one, I learned that I needed to interact socially with people at least twice a week. If I didn't do something social with others, then personally for me, I didn't feel good. So figure out what's important to you. What are those 2 or 3 things that you really need to be able to keep yourself healthy and keep your mind in a good place? And then prioritize them. Make them non-negotiable. Because if you aren't healthy, if your mind's not healthy, if your body's not healthy, then it's really hard to do all the rest of the things that you need to do in life. All right, next question. What are 5 skills to be at the top? And I assume at the top meaning to be a leader. There's lots of books written about and articles and things like that about skills. So you can go do a search on skills. It'll probably come up with 20, 30 skills that you need to be a leader. So I'm going to give you my answer, the Shellye answer. Because there's not a lot of wrong answers here. Here's what I have found, both for myself, but then also for people that I've hired and developed and coached. Number 1 is be an effective communicator. Be an effective communicator. And what that means is build your skills that you can communicate effectively so that people understand what you're saying, that you're providing clarity in your communications, and that you can take complex topics or ideas and actually communicate them in a simple way that people understand. Because what people really want from communications is simplicity and clarity. Because they want to understand, what are you trying to tell them? What is the message I should get? What is the goal that you're trying to have me go after? Right? What does good look like? What does success look like? I mean, these are things that we want to know. So the more clear that we are in how we communicate, and the more that we can communicate in ways that reduces complexity so that people understand, I find that to be the most effective. So that's one. Two, be responsible. The buck stops with you. And be responsible to me means that you make and keep commitments. You say you're going to do something, you do something. And then when something that you are involved with falls apart, has a problem, whatever it might be, own it. Take responsibility. When you're the person that every time something happens, it's someone else's fault, all you're telling people is you aren't responsible. You're not capable of actually making things happen because you're always blaming someone else. You're not taking ownership. So be responsible. Take ownership. Third, listen. Listen. I'm surprised by how many people actually don't listen well. And frankly, listening is tied to communications, because if you aren't listening well, odds are high you're not going to be able to communicate well. And I've also found that the higher you rise in an organization, the harder you need to listen, because people are less direct. They tend to hint, right? Give you ideas. They're less comfortable in telling you like it is. So you actually have to listen harder. So listening means when somebody's trying to share something with you, that you're giving them your undivided attention and you're paying attention to what they're saying and maybe even what they're not saying. So listening is not just with your ears, but it's also asking questions, clarifying what people are saying, right? Repeating back to make sure you understood. All those things are part of listening. So listening is really important. Fourth, the ability to inspire and persuade others. Because as a leader, many times you're going to have to do something hard, and you're going to need your team to be able to do something hard. And you need people who want to work with you, want to follow you. And so the best way to be able to do that is to be able to persuade people, right? And inspire them so they understand why they're doing what they're doing. They understand why it's important perhaps to society, to the company, to them personally. All of that is part of being able to inspire and persuade. And the last one I struggle with. It's the last one I'm trying to decide between whether it's being able to take risks effectively or it's empathy. So maybe I have 6 and not 5. Because I think showing empathy as a leader enables people to not only get to know you and feel comfortable, but be able to connect with you. And if they can connect with you, all those other points I made about communicating and listening and inspiring and persuading and all those things become easier. So showing empathy, showing people that you actually care about them, because most people want to be cared about. They want to know you care about who they are as a person and what role they're playing. So empathy. I'll pick empathy over risk-taking, but risk-taking would be my number 6. All right, I think I saw something come across I sure did, earlier in chat. So let me pause and move to that one. How can I build my skills in effective communication? All right, yeah, we just talked about how important that is. Let me tell you what I did. I was not an effective communicator. When I started my career, as a matter of fact, I was nervous every time I spoke. When I had to stand up and give presentations, or even when I was in a meeting and I was called on to share my perspectives or whatever, I was nervous. And I used a lot of ums and buts and hesitated, and I looked nervous, and I'm showing you how I was, right? It was not good. And when I looked around, all the senior leaders seemed to be all good and confident on their feet. And I'm thinking, my goodness, how am I going to become a CEO if I can't even communicate well enough to become a senior leader? So I actually invested in myself. I joined Toastmasters. I read some books on effective communication. And that helped because let me tell you, the key to being a good communicator is practice. Is practice. And many of us don't get many opportunities to actually practice. So whether you join Toastmasters or you find other ways to practice, what are other ways to practice? Sign up to, I don't know, maybe in your church to volunteer to actually read scriptures, to sign up with nonprofits that you might be engaged with and offer to be the MC, right, of an event. It's doing things where you actually have to speak. Because the more you speak, it's just like any other skill, the more comfortable you will get. The benefit of joining something like Toastmasters is not only do you get the opportunity to practice, but they give you feedback every time you speak. People literally get a piece of paper with the key elements of a speech, everything, how you presented, message, body language, everything, and they make comments. So when you're done, you get all this feedback, which then helps you improve what it is that you're doing. So I'm a big believer, invest in yourself, find practice, find something like Toastmasters, right, to join so that you can actually get good feedback, and all those things will help. The next thing you can do is to actually ask people for feedback. I'll give you an example. When I was running Metric Stream, one of my executives who was trying to improve his communications, he said to me, Shellye, I really would like your feedback when I present. So would you give me your feedback? And I said, yes. So the next time he did a presentation in front of customers, et cetera, and I was there, I made little notes and I gave him the feedback. So ask others to actually give you feedback so that you can learn from that, because it's hard to see ourselves when we're actually the one speaking. So hopefully that helped. All right, checking chat. All right, nothing. Let me go to the list. How do I continue to grow in my career if, oops, hang on a minute. Here we go. How do I continue to grow in my career if my work is not being recognized? All right, so a couple things on this one. The first is you need to ask yourself, why is it not being recognized? And this question is one that will cause both self-reflection, but it'll also cause you to look at, all right, what is it that I'm doing? Are other people around you getting recognized and you aren't? Or is no one getting recognized, right? That's an important data point. Two, is the work that you're doing, do people actually understand what you're doing and what it takes to actually achieve the things that you're doing? They may not, which is why it's not being recognized. Do you have regular check-ins with your boss or your team? You know, everybody's structured a little differently, so that, or communications, it can be a periodic update. The key is ask yourself first, why am I not? So are other people and just not you? And if other people aren't, then that says there might be a problem generally. So here's what you do about it. Number one, if the answer is you don't see anybody who maybe works for your boss or your team getting recognized, it's not just you, well, then you might want to have a conversation with your boss. And the way you have the conversation is you don't say, hey, I need to be recognized, right? That's not going to work. But what you can say is, here are the things that I'm working on that you've said are important, right? If we achieve my overall objectives, etc., it would really help me to understand and get potential feedback on, am I on track? Am I meeting expectations? Am I not? Etc. So as you see me executing and getting things done, just let me know, right? If I'm actually meeting your expectations, or if there are ways in which I can improve. So what you're now doing is you're asking your boss for specific feedback. And sometimes you need to ask for it. Not every boss is actually good about giving it. So that's one. The other way is perhaps people just aren't aware of the things that you're doing. So you need to find ways to share what you're doing that are not look at me, right? If nobody wants you doing that, but are doing it kind of indirectly. As an example, I'll make this up. Let's say you're working on a team, right? And everybody's got different pieces and projects, etc. Well, one of the things that you can start doing is maybe every 2 weeks, you just put together a team update, right? Not just yourself, but kind of team. But in doing the team update, you include, all right, here's what we're working on, here's progress that's been made, here's progress in what you've done, right? Yourself, etc. So now you have something written that's going out that actually includes what the team is doing, but it also highlights the things that you have contributed and done, right, in that period of time. The other thing you can do is do the response to when people ask you, how are you doing? Change it and answer it with what you were doing. Because people ask you that all the time, whether it's virtual or in person. They'll say, hey, Kofi, how you doing? Tyler, what's happening today, right? That's what they'll do. And what do you say? You say, oh, I'm fine, things are going great. Change that. Instead, when they say, hey, how are you doing? Say, you know what? I'm excited. We just closed the biggest deal we've ever done with, who knows, the federal government, right? And blah, 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 right? So you just share real quickly how you're doing when they ask you how you're doing. You tell them what you're actually doing and how it makes you feel. Shellye, how are you doing? Oh my gosh, I'm exhausted. I just spent the last 2 weeks working on blah, 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 right? How are you doing? Oh my goodness, we finally got the new system installed that we've been working on for the last 3 years, blah, 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 right? And this is what's happened. So change that how to, how are you doing, to what you're doing. So that's another way to share. Let me think, what else? One last point on this is sometimes by shining the light, I call it, on others, highlighting what other people are doing, they'll actually appreciate it and turn around and shine the light on you and let people know what you're doing. So what they'll say is, oh, as you're walking around and maybe you're talking to Leslie and somebody comes up and you can say, hey, have you heard what Leslie just did? Blah, 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 right? Or did you see what Jamal was able to pull off with blah, 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 right? What you do is you shine the light on someone else. It makes them feel good. It makes them feel valued, which is wonderful. And so often I've found, not every time, but often, people will start to do the same thing for you. So model the behavior that you actually want to see. All right. Next one. How do you make sure your voice is being heard in a male-dominated workplace? Well, I've definitely had lots of experience with that. My whole career has been in technology, which especially when I started out in the early 80s was definitely male-dominated and still is in many areas. Let me tell you a couple stories on things I learned here. Here's the first. I was given a kind of a temporary assignment being a right-hand person, if you will, to an executive at IBM. It was considered a development piece of work. It was just for a few weeks. And what he asked me to do was to sit in meetings that he couldn't attend. And then after the meetings, leave him a voicemail. Believe it or not, I'm going to date myself. This was before email. Yes, there was a time before email. So there's no email, so you had to leave people voicemails. So I did. And so I thought my job was to sit in the meeting, take copious notes, and then leave a very detailed message, which is what I did. Well, fortunately, he told me, he said, Shellye, listen, I really appreciate your sitting in the meetings, and I appreciate the fact that you're taking copious notes. He said, but I get a lot of voicemails, and it would be so much more helpful to me if you could make them more succinct. I said, okay. And now I took this to heart. So the next meeting I attended, I still took the same full notes, but then I reflected on what are the key points from these notes. And then I leave a voicemail. Then I stop, re-listen to it, and figure out, can I make it even shorter? Can I say what I said in fewer words? And then I delete it and re-record it, and delete it and re-record it. Listen, sometimes it would take me 20 minutes to leave literally a 30-second or a 45-second voicemail. Why? Because I was trying to take the feedback he gave me and do it as well as I possibly could. Well, at the end of those 2 weeks, he was like, Shellye, voicemails are awesome. That's exactly what I needed. So here's what I've learned from that experience. Being net and crisp is valued. All right? The next thing I learned about how to be heard and listened to really came from another experience, and that's when I got my first board seat. I was really having trouble being heard. I would say something and, the conversation would go on and somebody else might say something similar, and then a big discussion would ensue. Pardon me, I have allergies. And I was like, this is not going to work. So before the next meeting, I reached out to one of my board members and I said, I'm having trouble being heard. I'm finding that at times I'll make points in meetings, but they don't seem to really catch. So I'd like your help. If I make a point, right, that you agree with or think makes sense, I'd really appreciate if you would just echo it or reinforce it for me. And you know what? He did. And honestly, after him doing that a few times, I was heard. So a couple things. The best way to be heard in male-dominated environments is, number one, to be succinct, to make sure they hear you and don't turn you out. Two, make your point first, and then give the rationale for your thinking. Because here's what happens. When you give the rationale first, for instance, people might be saying, I don't know, let me make it up. Should we invest in this project? All right. So if you start out by saying, well, the marketplace is blah, 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 and this is what's going on with this particular industry, and here's what's happening here, here's what's happening here, and you do all this build, you lose people because they still don't know where you're going with what it is that you're saying. If instead you say, yes, we should build the project, the market's right, the demand is right, that this is right, and this is right. Boom. And here's why I feel that way. And then give your detail. Now you've got them, and you've made your points up front before anybody can interrupt you. The other thing to do in terms of being heard, like I said, in addition to getting somebody else to reinforce you, is you can reinforce yourself. If you make a comment or a point or raise an issue, and nobody picks up on it, and then later somebody else makes the exact same one or one that's kind of related, and there's lots of good feedback, then what you say is, oh, Jonathan, I'm so glad that you could add to the point that I was making earlier. I fully agree with blah, 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 blah. Right? So now what you did was you tied what he said, right, into what you said. Now the key is always do it in a positive way. Always do it in a positive way. Either compliment the person, hey, Jonathan, that's a great addition to what I offered earlier, blah, blah, blah. Always make it a compliment. By doing that, you're able to bring attention back to yourself, but not in a way that was self-serving. So those are a few ways in which you can indeed bring attention to yourself when you're not being heard. Be succinct. Get others to reinforce it if you're not being heard. Reinforce yourself if that's the case. And make sure you make your point up first and then describe. And then here's the last point. Be confident when you speak. If you offer points or ideas and don't sound confident, then people don't think you actually believe in them. So be careful of the adjectives that you use around your speaking. You don't want to start with things like, well, I think that da-da-da-da-da. People want to know what you know or what you believe. They don't necessarily want to know what you think, right? Because think sounds you're not sure. So perhaps we could do, or maybe this is, right? Those words all sound like you aren't confident in what you're saying. And therefore it's not going to engender a lot of discussion and people getting engaged. Be confident. Is it risky? Yes. Because they might come up and decide it's a stupid idea. But you know what? We go through a lot of stupid ideas before we get good ones. And many times, stupid ideas that come up actually generate the positive idea later on because people riff on them. So don't worry about that, right? The key to worry about is make sure that the good ideas and good thoughts that you have are actually heard, because that's why you're in the meeting. You're in the meeting, you're at the table for a reason. So make sure that your voice is heard. Okay, let's see, let me just check the chat. I see a few things coming through. Hi, Shellye. Any tips for people working in a career they know they don't want to stay in forever? Any tips for patience and still excelling in your current job while you work towards what you want? Yes. So first of all, when you know what you want, then based on what I said up front, do the work and figure out, all right, how do I get there from where I am? You might find that there are other people who've actually made the kind of transition that you're trying to make, right? Look at how they did it and what they did. If you can't find those people, then based upon what kind of job or company or industry you're trying to transition into, try to figure out what skills you've built, what experiences you have are relevant, right, for where it is that you want to go. And then figure out ways to network within that new industry or new discipline, right, what have you. So yes, it is fine to continue to work at what you're doing while you're figuring out how to get to where you want, as long as you are actively working toward it. What I find happens sometimes is even if we're in the career we don't quite want and we know what we want, we don't actually ever get around to doing the work, to figuring out how to get there. And then before you know it, you're 42, 48, 51, and you're still in the same place you were, saying, gosh, I'm not where I thought I would be. So the big thing is to be intentional. Create a plan for yourself and put timelines on it so that you can end up where you want to be ultimately within a reasonable timetable. Now, I see you had a follow-on, Susanna. It is often easier to work on the thing you're most interested in than the work you're in currently. Yep, that's true. If you're more passionate about it, more interested, yes, you will tend to want to spend more time on that, which is why it's critical to build your plan and work toward it. Uh-oh, hang on, everybody, I've got a battery problem. I just realized it didn't plug in. I don't want to lose you. Hang on, I'll do it quickly. Whew, saved. I set all this up and I forgot to plug in the laptop. So thanks for your patience, and I'm glad I didn't lose everybody on this. All right. Let me know, Susanna, if there's something else you want me to add to the question that you had. Okay, you got it. All right, next. Let me go back to the list. And again, feel free to add anything to the comments that you'd like. All right, next one. What do you do when you're stuck in a role that has developed into something else, but the pay is not developed with the changes in the role? And you can't get time with the manager to push the issue. This happens pretty often, so great question. Number one, you can't let your manager just avoid you. That's ridiculous. All right, so you need to get time on your manager's calendar. If that means stalking, then you stalk. Part of your manager's job is to actually manage you. And it's very difficult to manage if they won't even speak with you. So that's one. And honestly, if you are actively, meaning sending an email, making a call, stopping by the office, whatever it requires daily, and they're still avoiding you, then go see their boss. Because this is not acceptable. All right? And before you go see the boss, meaning see your boss's boss, even if you can't have the verbal conversation, then at least drop a note to your manager so they understand what you're getting ready to do, to say, dear so-and-so, I've been trying for the past 30 days to sit down with you and talk about the roles and responsibilities that I have on my plate, because frankly, they've evolved to the point where they are different from the role and responsibility that I originally had. My objectives and how I'm being measured have not been communicated, right? But I'd like to share what the issues are, right? Now, pay is also an issue, but don't focus on the pay up front. Focus typically when people expand your job, what they haven't done is gone back and told you now what does success look like with this new expanded role. So use that. That's why you can usually say that your goals and objectives aren't aligned with what it is that you're currently doing. And therefore, you need clarification on how you should be spending your time and what success and da-da-da, right? That's what you want to use as the hook. And then if they don't respond to that email, then you respond back again in like 2-3 days and say, I still haven't heard from you. Obviously, you are extremely busy. I'm going to make an appointment with blah, 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 whoever their boss is, to try to get some insight, because I want to make sure that I'm doing the job that the company expects from me. So you always do it, not in a direct threatening way, but you always do it because you are trying to learn. You're trying to make sure that you can do the job, right? That's required, blah, blah, blah. So always make it about you, not about you haven't done this, you haven't done that, you haven't done the other. Okay? That's the way to stay professional. Focus on yourself. Typically, by the time you get to that last email, your boss has met with you. And if they haven't, then go ahead and push forward and meet with your boss's boss. The other thing you can do is you can go to HR and ask for advice. right? Don't go to HR to complain. That's way used to HR is advice. So you go to HR and say, I've been trying to meet with my manager for a month, and they're just too busy. I think they might have too much on their plate because I need some guidance and I'm not sure where to go, right? That's a very fair thing to say. So there are other ways of doing this without you coming through that you are the complainer, right? Because honestly, this isn't your problem, it's your boss's problem. So those would be my big suggestions on how to get that. And once you have a meaningful conversation, then talk about the role and responsibility. Say, this is what the job originally was. Here's what it is now. Based upon this, it's actually a different job. So I want to know what the measures of success are, and I also want to know how the compensation will be adjusted, right? But you have to make sure that roles and responsibilities are different before you talk about compensation. So make sure you have that conversation first so that gets validated, and then you can talk about compensation. Also, do your homework based upon the expanded roles, and it's so much easier with the web. Go online and figure out what are people actually making that are doing this expanded role, so that you have some data points for yourself. Hope that was helpful. Okay, next. I intentionally accepted a nonprofit board president position for 1 year to expand my leadership profile and access to the business community. What are the best ways or activities to devote my time? Okay, well, if what you're trying to do is to actually develop relationships with the business community, then you want to make sure that in this nonprofit, you're spending time launching or holding programs that involve the business community. I don't know what kind of nonprofit it is, so let's just make it up. Let's say you're doing a nonprofit around, homelessness, right? Fine. Then what you might do is convene, right, a meeting with business leaders in the community to talk about this problem. And that way you get a chance to interact with business leaders. You might, as a nonprofit, come up with an award for companies that are leading in homelessness. By doing an award, you can hold an event, right? You have reasons now to talk to people, for people to actually submit things, etc. So look for programs that will actually engage the business community and take leadership on those. Two, look at different organizations that are symbiotic with your nonprofit organization that also involve business communities and start attending some of their events. That might be Chamber of Commerce. It could be an industry, right, oriented events, etc., and you're representing your nonprofit. Look at whether or not there are opportunities to speak at, again, events that involve business and tie to your particular arena. You can publish articles. You can write articles and publish them on LinkedIn. Again, related to what you're doing in your nonprofit. Let's go back to homelessness. You can write an article about how the homelessness situation has evolved in the region which you're responsible for, right? And 3 steps the community can take. And you can publish that. Well, that gives you then thought leadership, right? So there's lots of different ways that you can do this. Look at other nonprofit leaders you think have actually created stronger profiles, right, and business relationships. Talk with them, find out what they do, or just look to see what they do, because you can search and follow them online. So those would be a few suggestions. All right, next. Thank you for taking the time to answer my questions. I recently started a new job in a new industry. So far, I'm enjoying it, and the team is good. What is your advice for me to cope with new challenges and my fear that I cannot perform well? I took your previous advice of asking those who've done it before, but I still feel overwhelmed because these tasks are new and more complex for me. How can I overcome this self-doubt and anxiety and have more faith in my abilities? Well, what you're describing is a classic case of imposter syndrome, right? You get the new job, you get the new role, and you think, oh my God, I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not whatever enough, right? I'm going to fail. I'm not going to do well. That's imposter syndrome. And I've suffered from that my entire life. And here's the good news. Let me see what this looks like. Serena. Here's the good news, Serena. Most people, studies show it, most people suffer from imposter syndrome. Women more so than men, so it's not surprising. Women of color actually the most. So what that means is it's just a feeling that we get that everybody else gets. So it's not really personal to you. So when you get this feeling and this little voice in your head that's saying, I'm not good enough, I'm going to fail at this, I'm not smart enough, they're going to figure out I don't know as much as they think I know, right? That voice you keep hearing, just realize that voice is not real, right? If everybody hears that voice, then the voice is not inside, it's actually out there. So just what you do when you hear scary things on the TV, right? You turn the thing off, turn that voice off. Just tell yourself, this is not real, right? Everybody hears this is not real. If that doesn't work, then remind yourself, you got the job because they believe you can do it. So if they believe in you, you should be able to believe in you. And if that doesn't work, then fake it. Fake that you have the confidence until you do. Because here's the truth. If you think about it, Serena, you always figure it out. Whenever you've had a challenge or a problem or something new you had to tackle, right? It might have been hard, might have been difficult, but eventually you figured it out. So give yourself the benefit of the doubt here. You're gonna figure it out. And if none of those steps work, then reach out to people around you. I call them my cheerleaders. Reach out to people around you and make sure they're cheering you on. They're reminding you of how capable you are, right? How smart you are, all the things that you've done in the past that will enable you to do what you need to do now. Why do you think there are cheer teams for sports and the whole bit? It's to help people get riled up, ready to go, right? You can do this. We got you. We're behind you. We support you. Because you do have people like that around you. So when you're feeling a little insecure, right? That's the time when you tell yourself, listen, I'm going to figure it out. And then write down 3 times in the past where you figured stuff out. So you can look at it and say, listen, I've done it before. I did this job, I did that job, I took on this role, I did this speech, whatever it might be, right? So fake the confidence until you actually feel it. That's what I've done, because you will figure it out. And congratulations on the new role. Okay, next, I'm looking on here to see if I've got any chats with questions. What have you found to be effective in closing a B2B client? Honestly, business-to-business clients, number one, they have to ultimately trust you and believe in what you have to offer, your company has to offer, whatever it is. They have to believe that you understand what problem and issue they're trying to solve, and that you are going to be there with them to actually get this thing solved. So the first thing is just listen, right? Goes back to the skill sets we talked earlier. Listen, make sure you really understand why they need the solution, product, service, or whatever it is that you're actually selling. And then let them know that you understand it, clarify it, right? Here's what I think is important to you based on what you've said. Is that right? Am I missing something? And then make sure that you structure what you're proposing around meeting that set of needs that they've got. And by the way, sometimes the needs are very specific, right? I need a piece of software that does X, Y, and Z. Sometimes they also include personal needs. I need to install software that does A, B, and C, but I'm also trying to improve and raise up my own professional profile because I've got aspirations, which means, okay, you need to have the best software, but then figure out how can your company actually help them with boosting up their presence and their expertise in this particular area. Maybe you have them speak at one of your conferences, right? You figure out what's important to the person that you're closing. Because even though you're selling to ABC company, it's not the company that's buying, it's typically a set of buyers. So you want to understand what their needs are, as well as what the company's needs are, and address them. Be candid, be direct, and then make and meet the promises and commitments that you make. Those are the key. All right. Okay. Well, I think I've answered all the questions on the chat, and I've answered all the questions that I see here on my list. Let me just make a quick check and make sure that is the case. And it is. And one thing I want to do is I want to do a shout out in case she happens to be on. I have no idea. But I'm not sure how to pronounce the last name, Adizue, and I don't want to actually mispronounce it, but I want to say happy birthday. She sent me a note to say she was registering for the event and happened to be on her birthday. So happy birthday. I'm also a Cancer. I celebrated my birthday on July 6th. So yay, cancers. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for joining, and hopefully I'll see you next month. And the best way to learn when the next Ask Me Anything is to register on my YouTube channel. I send out notifications to let people know. Send your questions in advance, and I'll be happy to address them. Thanks very much, everybody, and have a great rest of your day. Bye.